Good morning, everyone. Welcome. This is Angela Coulter and
Sarah Sieg Avignoni.
bringing you this week's Ascended World Collective Energy Share. So I go back to my notes.
No, I was just pulling mine up going, oh yeah, I forgot to look at those. There we go.
Well, we had a great little conclave last weekend at the ocean. It was fabulous. And we were really heavily persuaded to make sure we got our work done.
Right. Might say we had no choice.
Besides playing at the beach and doing the other stuff that we were trying to, well, I mean, the ocean's it's great for releasing and processing because it's such.
And bringing stuff up, turning it up.
Yeah, turn it up. So it was great. Of course, such a beautiful ocean, and then we had to look at what we were there to look at.
Right.
But, we were talking about Friday, and it was like, well, what do we talk about? Where do we even start? Because that was 5 days of a cumulative expression and expansion and resolution and completion. It was like, well, where do we even start?
Right.
And so what we had been talking about is that we were there's so many polarities, right? And so we talked about last time, a couple of weeks ago, we talked about the illusion of control, right? Trying to control the illusion of control, whichever way that goes, doesn't even matter. And so it was interesting because what do we try to control? We can try to control things in definition, right? And so we were looking a lot at resolution of those polarities, right?
Almost like a coming to peace with them.
Yeah.
Well, we had to explore the depths of the polarities first.
Yes, we did. But with that, there's this huge amount. So from the spiritual, we want to talk about woo-woo, whatever you want to call it, whatever. From the spiritual side, we have a lot of doors opening. We have a lot of shifts happening. We started the whole thing that whole weekend talking about out in the park, talking about the group of us, the crossing over this doorway into this next iteration, right? There was a key that we remembered, right? And so if you want to call it activating, accessing it, remembering it doesn't even matter. We had our little experience with the deer, which was hysterical.
Right.
And basically the message from that, though, was to truly proceed through this door is to leave your judgment.
Whatever it takes.
Leave your judgment here.
Right.
And that was like the overarching theme of everything that we talked about.
Right.
So, and it's not saying that, it's not just accepting like that there are two sides to a story, or three sides, trialities versus even dualities, right? We were talking about the triality versus the duality, and it was like, well, what was most important is at this one point is to let go of all the judgment. That it's good, that it's bad, that one is better, that one is worse. We don't realize how many layers of that we have. And that's part of the control, the idea of needing to control, right? Well, this is right and this is wrong, or this is righter.
Right. And it's not that it's not even that there's two sides. It's every person has their own version.
Right.
And their own truth and their own embodiment of it. And it's acceptance of all that.
Yes. And the realization is that there aren't two sides. It's a billion perspectives. It's not even sides. It's just perspectives. And it's filters based on the individual journeys. And so you might have an energy that's overarching on this side or that side, but there's many that aren't even on either side. Right. And so, or what we call sides. And so what we came to was that resolution of the dual sides so that we can accept both right, as 100% valid
Right.
and 100% illusionary at the same time.
Right. Which is another polarity in and of itself.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which adds a dimension to the polarity.
Right. Because we were talking, I don't even remember what we got into a really good conversation on Friday, and now I can't even remember what we were talking about with this.
Well, we were talking about accepting, well, that part of this whole process is pushing us as a planet to a breaking point.
Yes.
And having the polarities become so frenzied almost that it pushes us to a place of, I don't even like to use the word clash, but almost irreconcilability, to where it just becomes a big blur.
Yeah.
Which that is part of, I saw somebody use an example, and I think there's even a word for this, where you're looking at like something in front of you, whether it's a book or your phone or whatever, and you put your finger in the middle, and all of a sudden you see two images, but it's the same thing, but a slightly different perspective. And if you just relax enough, it all, just like the magic pictures,
Right.
relax enough to where it all comes together. And I truly believe that that's what we've created for ourselves.
Well, yeah, and whatever, how many 7+ billion pieces, not even that, plus then all the animals and all the, all the
Trees.
plants and the trees and whatever, just all different perspectives, right?
Right.
And experiences as part of this whole thing. And so one of the things that we've explored a lot too has been that perspective of that regardless of how right we believe we are, it's still playing in the containment of polarity.
Right. Right.
And it's for us to resolve that within ourselves and to come to a transcendence of that, to say, this is my perspective on it, and I also accept all these other perspectives that are all these different versions, because they're all equally valid.
Right. Whether you're talking about skin color, religion, sexual orientation,
Mask
or no mask, all the same thing.
Exactly.
It's all the same thing.
It is all the same thing, right?
And I think that it and you and I have, and I don't want to use this word, but it feels appropriate. We have preached about going within and doing the inner work, and all of this is a reflection of where everybody is in that process.
Yeah.
And the coming to a reliance on your own guidance. And we've, how many times have we talked about that?
Well, because when we come to peace with that, with all of this stuff inside of us,
right,
then it all comes together out here, right?
Right.
So the thing about, let's go to the polarity thing for a while, because for a minute, because this is a funny thing, because this came up in our conversation, our group conversation, also at the ocean and at the beach, and so the thing that we forget, and it's so funny, is we'll talk duality, talk transcendence, talk this, and then we talk about shining our light,
right,
which, by the way, is locked in to duality, right?
Absolutely.
Because the only way to perceive light is to have dark,
right?
And it's almost like I always go back to like the Star Wars reference of that Jedis and the Siths, and it was like, well, the more you have this, the more you have this. So
exactly,
the more you focus on turning up the light, the more you are going to focus on expanding the dark
and sharpening the dark, the contrast, which is exactly where we are.
Exactly. And that's really where we get to, right? This whole whatever. And then, we even got caught in it, right?
Right.
And the whole discussions of like letting it all come up and looking at the collective. And then we were focusing on the non-judgment. Good morning, Laurel. We were focusing on that and the non-judgment and all that kind of stuff. And then what happens is we fell right into judgment.
Exactly. Bam.
We got into And then we got to the place of literally, right, throw freaking gasoline on it. Let's light the match and blow the whole damn thing up because we're done. Right.
Right.
Which is a judgment because it was like, oh, it's a mess. It's too whatever.
It's too hard to
It
unravel.
would be
It's just
so
too
easy, so much easier
complex.
to just blow up the whole thing.
Right. Start from scratch.
Right.
Square one.
And so we got really excited into that. We're like embracing the dark, you know, blah, 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 you know, that whole like destructive energy. And they're like, whoa, wait a second. No, this feels way too familiar.
Right. Right. And that's when we started looking at that micromanaging and control.
Yes. Because then we're like, oh, wait, now this is what we've done over and over and over and over.
I mean, we even sunk a whole continent.
Well, more than once.
Right.
By the way.
Right. Trying to start over, trying to do it different, fix it.
And yet then we cycle it around and it ends up being very matrixy. Like, what's the matrix? What do they talk about when he gets to the architect? I think that's in the second matrix. It's like, oh yeah, well, we always get to this point and this is the choice you always make. And then we just reset the whole thing and we start over. And so like, if we keep on saying we want to do it differently, right, then we have to stop. You know, it's funny because remember we got into a conversation, the four of us, about childbirth at some point, right? Over the weekend. And then it was like one of us had just had C-sections. It was like, well, so what is it like to have to push, right? And it's like, well, it's like, and I never understood until like this weekend, like why that conversation came up, because it was so out of context for everything else, right?
Right.
And what we're talking about, it's like, oh no, when your body says, push this baby out, right?
You have no choice.
You set yourself into that path, and it's like every instinct is because it's like, get it out, right?
Right.
That's really where we had gotten to with it. Let's just freaking throw gasoline on it and you know, and then throw a light on it. And it was like, oh yeah, let's just get out. Let's get it done. Right.
Right. Stop the madness.
And then we're like, oh yeah, this is why it felt so good. Right. And the more we went, the more we started picking up that energy of, oh no, we just want it to happen. And then we're like, wait, no, we've done this. Stop. Which then what happens is when we have started that momentum of energy, especially at the collective level, right? We just then, even the pieces of us are like, oh, wait, no, this might be something we want to stop.
Right.
It's the momentum has gone too far, right? Or we believe it is. So then we backed up and we're like, okay, now let's look at this differently. That was when we were forced into staying in that room until we got this all figured out.
Right. That's right.
So, and literally so we should tell the story because that was really funny, right? So we were staying at my daughter's apartment at the ocean because she's done with college and now she's living home, but she's got her lease until the beginning of August. So we have our condo at the beach. So we went down to the ocean and we were going to watch the sunrises every morning, and we had gotten to touch on a bunch of the stuff that felt very uncomfortable. And we had the conversations that were bringing up all this stuff. And we kept on avoiding going in and actually doing the work that we were being pulled to do. And then we went to go watch the sunrise that morning, and my car was booted because I wasn't parked in a visitor spot and I didn't have visitor's pass. And then we couldn't call until 9:00, and it was 5:30 in the morning. And so it was like, oh, okay, well, guess we're just staying here and doing this.
Right.
Stop. Like literally there was a big note that was like stuck into the driver's side window that said, stop. And I was like, and yes, it costs a little money. And it was a little irritating, but it was like, oh yeah, okay, because we just had successfully procrastinated to that. And it was actually pretty humorous because all four of us got the message immediately. It was like, okay, guess what? We're forcing ourselves to look at this. So looking at it, and then what happened is, you know, we go out there with the intention. Where do we get to go out there? Oh, the keys. Because we were talking about seeing the earth in a containment cage, almost like a cage for visualization, right? And it was, of course, what we put on there to keep it confined to a certain part of what we wanted to create. That's a control thing.
Right. It's like a control and an experiment.
Well, which it is, because it was just a part of, and the thing that we forget, that we were, of course, reminded in doing this long weekend together, was that it's part that the earth, we forget, we have forgotten, we have successfully conditioned ourselves to forget so much that we forget that earth is only one small piece of a much bigger project.
Right.
So we forget to pull out our perspective beyond earth, and all we do is sort of look at earth. But that's sort of like saying, I've got a fingernail, and that's all that exists is this fingernail.
Right. And I'm going to obsess about it.
And that's all I'm going to focus my attention on is
Right.
this fingernail. It's not, and considering it as this just floating particle in space instead of part of my finger, my hand, and my arm. And so that's sort of what we do with earth, even though earth, and it is an important part of the project, is my understanding, because it's a key in itself. And then there's this other stuff. Well, so then we were looking at that, right? And we got into getting the key to unlock the cage, but then we realized that there are many cages that we have ourselves
Right.
collectively encased in, as we've kept it so that we could keep a control, right, or create a controlled environment, right, in duality.
Right.
So the four keys, hey Kathy, the four keys had to
Confinement, freedom,
confinement, freedom, sight and blindness,
thinking and knowing,
thinking and knowing, and
illusion and reality.
reality. Meaning that we don't turn the key in one side or another, meaning that we dissolve the key and let it assimilate altogether to realize there is no duality in that, and we can see both without it having to be exclusive. We can allow both without it being needed.
I mean, that just the freedom and knowing that you don't have to choose, and that you can accept that wholeness of it all.
Right.
I mean, that is just, it takes away that whole tension that we had built up.
Yes.
In that polarity. I mean, it just, and yes, I have to remind myself. I get drawn back in, but
Well,
it's getting better, easier.
well, it's a habit. It's such a deeply ingrained habit of ours, right?
And there's judgment of others attached to being detached.
Right.
Which is just crazy.
Yeah, there's so many levels.
I know there are so many levels, and it's used to be that it was us versus them, and now it's everybody against everybody. There's dissidents in families. There's, it's everyone has their version of the truth.
Well, and I keep on thinking about the messaging that I had gotten, and think a lot of us had gotten a while back, which, time, whatever, which was that things were going to get more polar before
Right.
they sort of broke and came back together, right? Which is, look at exactly where we've gotten, and we've gotten underneath the rocks and crevices and cracks, right? Where we have thought we didn't have that judgment and duality and whatever, and that polarity, right?
Right.
I mean, and the funny thing was, the more we did, right, that was the funny part, is until we got past all of those freedoms, right, freeing ourselves of all those, and allowing those keys to be unlocked, dissolved, like completed, that, even after that, it's been a constant, constant observance, right? To
Yeah. Well, and there's so many applications that we haven't even recognized yet, because we're so focused on all of this. That's the loud polarity. When, once you come to a place of resolution with all of that, there's even more underlying this. So
yeah.
it's even though these seem at the moment to be the most challenging, they're the loudest, so they're the most obvious. Everything else kind of is like the snake under the water that you don't
Right.
see until it
I
strikes.
know. And then we're like, oh no, like we don't have to get rid of, like, look, that, leave that over here, because we're dealing
Right.
with this stuff, right?
Right.
But, you know, I don't know about you, but ever since we have returned, it's been a constant observance within myself, because I am noticing every judgment that comes up in my consciousness.
Well, and what I've found, the easy part of it is I can feel it in my body when that judgment starts coming up, because it's so heavy.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
It's so heavy, and it grabs my attention, and I'm just like, oh, okay, here's another one.
Yeah. And sometimes I will like just ride the wave and let it go. And because when we stop trying to control it, right,
Exactly. Yep.
it's just not getting embroiled in it and saying, okay, let me just play this out, like, and I did that a bunch over the last several days. It's been, but then what happens is then it just rides itself out. And then because it doesn't have any resistance, it doesn't have any opposition, right?
Right. Right.
It just
Right.
is. And then it's like, oh, okay. Yeah, I see where that comes from. It is what, and then it comes back to, it is what it is, right?
Right. Right.
Yeah. And so that's been and I think that's because we don't realize how deep judgment goes, right? Because we got into that conversation too.
Oh, yeah, we went way down that rabbit hole, and we gave some discernment to everything we were calling a judgment, as sometimes things are just an observation.
Right. But it's when we think when something is better or worse because of what we
Right.
observe, that becomes the judgment.
Right. Right.
Yeah. And we're afraid to let it go collectively. That's what we were looking at,
Right.
because we've enjoyed it so much.
Well, and we aren't allowing ourselves the full remembrance of what it's like without it. So that immediately wants to bring fear into it of that unknown.
So maybe we should bring up some examples so that others get what we're talking about.
About holding both.
Well, versus holding one that we're not even aware of.
Well, I know, what is it? Um, like knowing and thinking. It's like we know that this is all an illusion, but our thinking is what's creating it and allowing us to go through the motions of it being real. So go through the motions of living like we're living, with the knowing that it's an illusion and that you have the power to change it and control it and manipulate it, and that there is no right or wrong in playing that game.
Right. Anne says afraid of what will take its place.
Right.
And the opposite side of that is being excited about what can take its place.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's almost come to that place where a little remembering doesn't do it. It's trusting that you'll have full remembrance of everything. And that's what allows that equality to set in, and that wholeness to take us to that place where we, without the remembering, can't create.
Well, and that goes with, like, so yours, I know when we worked with you, you did the knowing, the thinking plus versus knowing, right?
Yeah.
And with me, it was the sight versus blindness. And I cried because I was like, no, we don't want to let go. We collectively don't want to let go of the blindness.
Right.
Because the blindness creates the contrast, right? Because without the contrast, we don't see the colors in the rainbow. Like, and that's what, you know, the belief was, to let go of the blindness would be to let go of the diversity.
Right.
Instead of, once I walked through that doorway, realized, oh no, now it's all inside of me and I can perceive it and see it even more because I'm not putting limits on it through that blindness, right?
Right.
So it was like this. I had a lot of really vivid dreams last night that I think are just going, things that we're doing out there, right? And so there was a string of events that were moving very quickly in this dream that I was having. And I, you know, like, somebody turned to me and said, well, you remember this code? Well, it was like an entry code to something, right? And I
Mm-hmm.
was like, no, I don't. And they're like, yeah, you do. And then I stopped for a minute and then I was like, oh yeah, there it is. And it reminded me, like, when I looked at that this morning, I was thinking about the movie Arrival, right? With the whole, like, forward, backward, there's like that circular. Well, it's all taking time away, right? And just saying, no, I can be blind to something in this moment. And if I stay in that transcendence
Right.
and allowing that, I can say, okay, well, now I don't need to be blind to this anymore because it's already there. I can just take away the veil, right?
Right. Yeah. Almost like you don't have to be fully immersed in a pool to know what it feels like to be wet.
Yes. Which we believe you do.
Right. Right.
But that's part of the blindness too, right? That's part of that
Exactly.
polarity. So we can allow ourselves to see the veil, to see the veil, well, which is what we do, or we can take them away and see beyond it. And, you know, the question that I've always had up until recently has been, well, what's the purpose of seeing everything if it's just playing out the way we set it up to play out, right?
Right.
Because then the mind says, well, then this is just too frustrating. Well, there's judgment. This is just too whatever, there's judgment. Um, and that's where a lot of us who have that remembrance are getting tired or have gotten tired,
Right.
exhausted, overwhelmed, moments of feeling futile,
Yeah. Futility. Absolutely.
um, and saying, you know, okay, so if it's going on, how do I, like, and saying, okay, so I agreed to it as part of this. So I can also see beyond it and also still be a part of it, right? And that's that whole, because the whole judgment was like the thing I was talking about we were talking about several weeks ago. And that whole, like, idea of when, like, wanting to skip past this chapter in
In
the
the
book.
book. Right.
Like,
Right.
oh, come on, this is so blah. I don't want to go through this chapter. That's a judgment, right? That's because,
Right.
oh, it's too tiring. Oh, it's too this. And it's like, well, if we didn't love it, we wouldn't have created it, right? So, but to stay transcendent to it in a place of wholeness, and that's where we get into that inner guidance, going back to where you start, you know, like you were talking about when we started,
Right.
is the guidance will be there. Guidance is always there in the moment, even as we are, this part of our consciousness is immersed in that. And things are going to start, well, things are happening already that are things we can't project because our
Right.
minds have no context, you know, to protect them. You and I were talking about being on house arrest in January before anybody even knew what that meant.
Right.
Like, we didn't even know what that meant.
Right.
We call it the house arrest. Why are we calling it that? And I still feel like every time we bring that up, I'm like, I feel like a ping. I need to go back and listen to that podcast that we did on the house,
Right.
because there's something important about that. And it was about being embodied versus actually being on house arrest. But it was funny that that whole term came up. And so trust that there's a lot more that's about to happen. And it's all part of the shifting and completion. And the thing for us to do is to not get stuck in the polarity of judgments.
Right.
To see things as they are and to transcend and to just simply go by guidance. And this is guidance at a completely different level, by the way.
Oh, right. Yeah. It's like pushing a baby out. Full body experience.
Right. And it's just like, okay, I'm just doing this because there's nothing else I would do. Like, I just am this, right? I'm just
Right.
being this embodiment. And it can change on a dime. But the thing is, for us to be able to do that is to let go of the judgment of what comes in and to be guided to do, because that's what holds us back the most.
Right. Absolutely.
Say, oh, I've always done this. Oh, or people know me as doing it this way. Or, oh, blah, blah, blah. You know, like all that kind of stuff. Those are all judgments. So I'm judging myself. I'm judging others. I'm saying, oh, if I do this way, because I'm guided, I'll be, ridiculed. I'll be judged.
Mm-hmm.
And looking at things from the both sides matter, which you came up with, what I thought was great, is like looking at, it's not just my perspective that's important.
Right.
It's all perspectives, fulfilling their embodiment, that's important. And us throwing gasoline on the whole thing and lighting fire, as sexy as it might feel.
Right. It comes from that place of judgment.
It does.
Right. Versus unconditional acceptance.
Unless we're guided
at a place of wholeness.
Unless we're guided at some point to just simply allow it to dissolve. Right.
Which is that's a whole different energy.
Yes. So, there's still, I think, a lot that we have yet to process around all that, because this is a completely different way of existing in observance.
Right.
So, I guess where we would let this go this week has to do with what, for the session, allowing this to be in your remembrance.
Right.
Allowing that, see, my whole back is tingling just even looking.
Unconditional acceptance.
Yeah. Also being able to see both sides. Yeah. That both sides matter, right?
Right. All sides matter.
All sides matter. Right. And okay, we're not even talking about the other thing that, causes
right.
That does cause all that judgment. We're
talking all perspectives matter.
All perspectives matter.
That feels really
the ones
good.
That we judge as wrong or bad or whatever, because they add the contrast. They add the dark to the light, or the light to the dark, or, however you want to look at it, or they add the depth to the color. They add, so like if we look at, and we're at this place of shifting to a place of remembrance in a holographic way. And to do that is for us to let go of judgment of the 3D so that we can see beyond it. Right.
Right.
So to really quantum physics and whatever, it's like saying,
yeah, it's our judgment of 3D that keeps us in the 3D.
Exactly. And so like, it's like looking at, that just made my head tingle. So it's like,
yeah, that kind of took my breath away.
I was waiting for it. It was coming. Took us a little bit to get there. But it's like taking a 2D picture, right? And saying, no, it has to be, length and width.
Right.
Right. And then height is trying to say, but I'm over here. And we're like, no, we're so concerned with length and width. We got to keep the length and width. And then the height's like, but this is going to add a bigger picture, perspective to the picture, until we see that, or allow ourselves to say, okay, I see the length and width, and now I'll let there be other possibilities, or I can see the bigger picture, or I'll allow myself to see the bigger project. That's taking the cage off of the earth. It's really taking the cage off of ourselves to remember the entire project in a holographic sense, because it's important for us to do that now, is all I know.
Yep. Right. And that is what is to be done.
Yes. So maybe that's what it is. It's allowing ourselves that transcendence, the observance of all sides matter, of all pieces and parts, and not just all sides, all perspectives matter, because they fulfill the holographic part, so that we can stop concerning ourselves with the judgment of all of those perspectives and know that they're perfect, so that we can remember the other aspects that are even more important of fulfilling this piece. Because when we have, what we understood is that when we have thrown the gas on it and lit threw a match on it, when we had thrown the gas on it and then threw a match in and blew it up and started over again, we missed this other aspect that's out here going, wait.
Right.
this is important. And once you see this, you'll get this.
Right. That coming to the realization that all of this is just another distraction.
Well, or it's not a distraction. It's part of the perfect whole, but it's that.
But it's a distraction from this.
Right. Right. It would be
Getting
like,
caught up in it creates the distraction of this,
right. And if
from this.
it would be like us obsessing about the 200,000 cells, like say in our upper arm or something, right?
Right.
Oh, I'm going to put all my energy and focus on that. And then you forget about the rest of your body.
Right.
Right. That's the same kind of thing. And now this is at a much, much bigger level. And you know, by the way, we created our bodies to remind us of the bigger interrelated picture of the organism that we created as Earth, that we also decided to embody on as part of this interrelation. And now it's like, okay, now we need to look at these other aspects that we've forgotten because we've gotten so myopic as project managers of this particular part of the project.
Right.
Managing the part of the program. That's time for us to step back and breathe and be able to see the bigger things. So whatever it is for us to be able to start doing that, I think that's what our focus is today. That feels.
Oh, there's a yawn. Yep.
My whole body is already a tingling. So so let's go and do that, shall we?
Yes.
Anybody's listening or watching, you can do this live or outside of space and time. And all you need to do is close your eyes, take a deep breath, and be willing to receive. That was the rabbit hole.
Right.
Oh,
In the beginning, I saw myself just holding my arms out, really, like accepting it all, taking it all in, and then I felt like, okay, it's overwhelming me, it's over, and I felt like I was being crushed by it, and I was like, well, wait a minute, it's all within me. I don't have to hold it external to me. It's all within me already. And man, that was just like taken off. That felt so much better.
I kept on seeing, and I don't remember specifics now because it was like this inside a thing, the inception thing, inside a thing, inside a thing, inside a thing. And it was like, oh yeah, when you let go of this, because I was looking at something, and then it was almost like I was looking at something like really bizarre, like a porcupine or something, right? And then it was like, but then you do this, and then it like let go of its form, like, or like I was seeing at the next level, and then it was like and I was like going out, and then I was like, oh, and then I just sort of let go and just went all the way out there.
Right.
Really good.
Right.
And I was like, oh, that feels so free. That feels
I
so
know.
expansive. Oh, that was lovely. As always, as always. Well, everybody sit in that. I'm feeling nice and tingly. I know this is going to be probably a multi-week discussion, I'm sure, because there's
Right.
a lot of different pieces and parts to, and it is all under the thing about control and polarity and resolving all of that in a very different way than we thought we would be doing.
Right.
So,
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
yeah. So everybody just sort of sit in this, come back to it, do the clearing again, or the resolution, or whatever you want to call it, and or just sit in that in your meditation and your self work, and allow yourself to come to that and be observant of your own thoughts. Because I'll tell you, for me last week, it was like almost like the little hidden judgments came to the surface even more prominently to be seen.
Right.
Like, wow, I feel really judgy this week after all of that, like being free of it. And then it was like, oh, and then I was like, oh, but then I could let it pass through, not give
Yeah.
it any power, not give it any resistance, and then it was just gone. And then it was like, oh, I can see this so much easily now, so much more easily now. So I think once we get into the habit of that, then that's when this other aspect starts to come in. And we can talk multidimensionality till we turn blue in the face. We can talk activations and whatever, like new
Clearings and
doorways and this and that,
right.
and all that's going on. Except for us, the real clear thing for us that came in at the very beginning of the weekend was for us to move forward is to really let go of the power of the judgment
Mm-hmm.
in any way.
Right.
So that's what this overarching theme is, and I feel like this is going to be a multifaceted project effort.
Right.
So
Well, and we're also working on a class that's
yes,
going to help with some of this.
yes, we hope to get that out, and we'll be doing probably lives in the next couple weeks to go through that, the idea of it,
Right.
and coming to consciousness in a completely different kind of way that's very practical, and yet also different than what standard reality seems to be.
Right. Different than what we're practicing.
Yes, that's for sure. So stay tuned on that. Stay tuned on the Ascended World page, and we'll be back also next Monday with our weekly collective energy share, like we are here at 9:30 a.m. Eastern Time. So thank you, and we'll see you again next time. This is Angela Coulter, and
Sarah Sieg Evanioni.
signing off with this week's Ascended World. Have a good one.